Hello, everybody. Welcome to KirinoCast. Today is my episode number 8, and I have a software engineer here, James Freaker, who has an incredible career, and he's gonna first talk to us a little bit about the companies that he worked for and the one that he works for, and how he learned and how he was able to get skills from one company to the other in order to help the companies that he worked and he works for. One more thing that I will ask James to tell us is about one project that he developed and which was incredible. He developed a project called Graduate Theory, which is a podcast where he talks about different things. And James, I want you to tell us about this project, also about the career that you have been developing and the companies that you worked. Pretty much this. Welcome, James Freaker.
Hey mate, thanks for having me on the show. Looking
Thanks for
forward
coming.
to chatting and sharing my thoughts on some different topics.
Great. So, James, as a software engineer, how was it to get into the market and what did you learn through RAA Code Camp? And now I think that you are working at AZN, right?
Yeah, ANZ, yeah. So I finished university a couple of years ago. I did maths and finance at uni, so um, I kind of transitioned into a software engineering role. It wasn't something that I had done a little bit of it at university, so I did some computer science electives. So I had a little bit of a background, but when I left university, I started working at ANZ, which is like a big four bank in Australia. And through the graduate program, I was able to have electives. So I was able to say, choose like a certain area that I wanted to work in for 6 months. And the areas that I chose to do software engineering basically, or like some variation of that. And then, yeah, through that, was able to kind of get experience doing that, completed the graduate program, and then after the graduate program was able to continue kind of that journey. And yeah, that's what I do now. Um, so it was kind of not something that I studied directly, but I had some experience with like you mentioned the code camp stuff. So there was, I think it still exists now, but there's a company in Australia called Code Camp, and essentially we ran. I was an instructor, and we helped run code camps for like primary school age kids during the school holidays. So we had like a little programming language, and we would teach kids how to make a game, and it was really good fun. And there was a number of things I learned through doing that, and it was a great opportunity. Didn't really have like much application to like day to day and like sort of being employed as an engineer, but a great experience nonetheless. And yeah, just I guess found my way into an engineering role, and I'm really enjoying it. And had known for a while it was something that I wanted to do. When I was at uni, I was studying maths, but I kind of did it with the intention that I feel like if I learn maths, I can become an engineer. But if I study like computer science, it would be tricky to go and learn maths later. So that was kind of my thoughts. I felt like studying
Oh,
maths
well,
opened up more doors. So
right. It's a
that
good
was
thought, and sorry to interrupt you, but when
yeah.
you go to software engineering school, you learn a lot of maths.
Yeah, I think you do learn some maths in like if you studied software engineering, you would kind of get like, there's algorithms and this kind of stuff. It's definitely like a logical uh and problem solving type course. But I think the maths, like we were doing, really a lot of the theory behind like data, like for example, data science. I took a subject on that, and it was like, okay, random forest, which is like a machine learning pattern. How does this work? Like, what are the statistics? Like, what is the actual mathematics that underlies a lot of these kinds of techniques? And so that's something that the depth in that direction, at least, you're not really going to cover in. So if you took like the same data science subject and did it in software engineering, you would get more of the practical approach of like how to use, like when would you use one or the other. But yeah, we were kind of getting into a lot of the theory around the maths part of it and going quite deep there, which is I found very interesting and yeah, and valuable.
Nice. And did you? Well, I don't think that you applied any of the maths or knowledge when you opened your podcast, Graduated Theory.
No, I think it's very separate, and certainly I think to some can come as a bit of a surprise that there's an engineer doing a podcast, perhaps similar to yourself.
Well, there are many.
Well, I mean, it's quite separate, right? It's like almost like it's more similar to like journalism or like something like that.
Communication.
Communicate, yeah, exactly. Like social media, it's like marketing, these kinds of things. Whereas engineering is yeah, in some ways they're kind of the opposite to each other. So yeah, I think but I think that being said, it was a really good experience for myself. And like you said, I didn't really use directly a lot of the skills I learned from engineering, but I think there was still a lot of applications in terms of like, okay, I want a guest on the show. What's like the minimum number of steps to take to like get them on the show? Like, how do I kind of streamline the process to get them? Like once I've contacted them, yeah. So I kind of made, I guess, a flow of like first it's reach out, then this, and this, and this, and just kind of really streamlining that whole process. And I think a lot of the ideas and basis for that was able to come from like the engineering mindset of how do we know, for example, there's an engineering principle called dry, which is like don't repeat yourself. So ideally you're not writing the same code twice. And so it's a similar thing with like a sales or like a customer journey where it's like, okay, we want to do the thing once and then that's it, like then it's done. And so that was kind of, and there's probably other applications, but yeah, I think it definitely came in handy when thinking about, and even just like onboarding technology. Like if you're doing it for work, it's much easier to be like, I'm going to use this tool or whatever, because you're just much more familiar with how different tools work as well.
Right. And when you developed the project, I remember that when we met at Toastmasters, you did mention that along the project, you applied the hero's journey principle in order to develop the project. How actually was it?
Yeah, I think so. For those who maybe listening don't know, like hero's journey is kind of this story arc that's used in a lot of it's like used quite broadly across different films. So you might have something like The Lion King is a good example. So you'll have the start of the movie. You've got like Simba, who's the kid, doesn't really know what's going on. Kind of grows up, faces a big challenge, which is when like Scar comes and takes over the pride or takes over the land, and then he goes away, finds some friends. The friends come back, and then he is able to like come back and win the thing. And this is like quite a common story arc. So like Harry Potter is a similar thing where like he goes somewhere, bad thing happens, he goes away, finds a mentor, comes back, and then like does the thing. And so yeah, there were a few applications of this, and I guess one main one was around how do you. So I guess let me rewind. Core idea is that humans really attracted to this arc of a story, like there's certain ways to frame a story that make it more like humans just resonate with that more. And so using the hero's journey and how you think about how to structure your own narrative in terms of, okay, why did I start graduate theory? Okay, let's create a hero's journey for this. And then that's the thing that, like, if I come on Leandro's podcast and then I say, okay, like the podcast, like this is the reason why I started. And then it's like the hero's journey arc. And so it's much more like you'll find that more interesting than if I just say, oh yeah, blah, blah, this and that, whatever. So I think that was an interesting idea. It's like, how do you construct the narrative around, like, what's your story behind why you did a certain thing, or, and I think you can just use that in a lot of different ways, like whether it's you're selling a product or, yeah, you're starting a new thing or whatever it is, like constructing the story behind it, and how you're going to sell and explain that to people is, yeah, important to think about. And I think hero's journey is an interesting way of approaching it.
Yeah, no, basically, I see a lot the hero's journey being used by marketers, right? When they want to, pretty much, when they write email marketings to get the attention of their audience. And it was actually the first time that I saw somebody talking about this topic, this concept in a project development, and which was great. And how did it come across in your project? Like, have you finished? Have you gone through the whole journey?
I think there's well, I think it's a nice way of telling a story, but it maybe doesn't map onto like actual human experience um, like super well. I think you can kind of craft like you can make a hero's journey out of your experience, but it's you probably have like multiple journeys going on at the same time, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. I don't think it's not like a one-to-one thing. Like, where are you at in the journey at each time? I think it's quite blurry, but yeah, I think in terms of the podcast, like it was the way I crafted the story was like, or the way I learned to craft it at least was like, hey, I'm a person. I've just finished high school, so just finished university, coming into work. Like my parents don't work in corporate at all. I don't have any relatives that are like corporate leaders or anything. I'm now working in big corporate Australia. Got no idea how this really works. So in order to solve this problem, I start graduate theory, where I go and speak to different people about how did they get to where they are? What did they learn? What advice would they give themselves if they were in my position again? And then through that knowledge, aiming to upskill myself and the audience, and sort of solve this problem for them. Yeah, I mean, so like I think you can expand and like make the narrative much better, but that was kind of the rough plan, and it's all true, of course. But yeah, that's kind of the narrative that trying to frame it, and I think that was something that I learned later on in the podcasting journey. But certainly, I can see that it's quite a valuable thing to do if you're trying to
Okay.
develop.
Well, I'm going through the journey right now, right? So soon, right now, like I told you, and to all my audience, I'm inviting this season. I'm having 10 guests to talk about their career, things that they do, pretty much about technology, engineering, and entrepreneurship, right? Which is being great, and that's pretty much the journey that you have gone through, and it's pretty much the concept of the hero's journey, which is being great. Now, James, I want to jump into data science, right? Data science, and its importance. Like, in summary, can you explain to the audience how to apply data science in a daily basis in society?
Yeah, sure. I guess data science, or my interpretation is like we have a lot of information about things, how things work. How can we use that information to um, create better, or like develop insights into how things work? How can we do like data driven decision making? How can we find better ways to do things? And data science is really the process of taking the raw information and converting that into value. Um, so, I mean, it gets applied in tons of ways. I mean, from like how things are priced at the supermarket, that's data science. Like we understand customer behavior, we're going to price things at this price. There's data science in that. Data science in probably like every single app that you use. Anything that involves like personalized experiences. That's all data science. Even like on the business level, like business is going to choose A or B thing, typically a data driven decision. Um, Whether it's using machine learning would be a way to do data science, I suppose. But yeah, it's really around sort of data driving a lot of the decision making. I think that's really what data science is, and particularly I guess with use cases using machine learning,
Using
or
machine learning.
like more complicated mechanisms for extracting the value out of the data. It becomes more of a data science thing, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Is it Python used a lot in a way to develop applications using the concept of data science?
Yeah, I think Python is definitely the industry standard programming language for
Well,
data science in
many
really all
companies they
hard
use
applications.
Java, right,
I think they
as
like
a main
Java.
programming language.
Yeah, I suspect Java is very popular, but I think
Oh no.
my understanding is not in the context of a data science. Like data science
Okay.
would almost always be done in Python. I think there'd be some cases where someone would use something different, but I think certainly it would be most common for a data science thing to be written in Python. So, I mean, an example of what might be the case is like data scientist comes in, builds the model in Python, and then the model is extracted and then embedded in an application that's written in a different language. That could certainly be the case. But yeah, I think certainly for like train test all this kind of stuff for your model, it's almost always done in Python. I think it's definitely the industry standard.
Okay. In this context, do you use Excel for any analysis?
I don't personally. I think some folks might for very quick ad hoc things, but I think certainly not in my experience, at least in the data areas that I work. Like Excel is sometimes used, but it's typically for like ad hoc things. If you're going to do something that you want to have some level of robustness, and you're going to do something that's like a bit more compute intensive, then typically you would go for some kind of Python solution.
Okay, great. And out of all of it, I think that one thing that many people do nowadays is to they market themselves through social media. How important is to have your image, your voice on social media platforms, perhaps on LinkedIn, because it's the most used platform for professionals?
Yeah, I think I've definitely heard a lot of examples of people finding it very beneficial to post on social media, particularly LinkedIn if you're looking for like professional outcomes. Even Twitter, I think, is probably good for that sort of thing. I think yeah, I think there's maybe some caveats around like you probably want to post things that you actually know about, and have some expertise on, so that people will actually listen to you. I don't want to speak about my opinions on like some topic that like someone else is much more qualified to talk about. I think like it's much easier for me to say, here's what I learned about this, or like here's my experience doing this, because I have much more authority of what I have learned, um, versus kind of the other way around. So I think that's a good way of doing things. I don't think it's um, like certainly most people don't do that, so I don't think it's bad if you don't do that. But I think there can be a lot of value to gain, and certainly I've seen people develop large audiences on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever it is, and that has ended up becoming quite valuable. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be gained there, certainly.
Well,
And yeah,
Twitter
I
is
think I think
quite.
it, yeah. Sorry, go.
No, sorry. It's just getting the line. Twitter is quite new for me. I haven't seen many people using Twitter for develop professional relationships. Do you have many people around you that use Twitter to develop their relationships professionally speaking?
Yeah, I suppose it's might be different in terms of like which relationships are you trying to build. I mean, I don't have direct experience with this because I don't post on either platform like super often. I did post on LinkedIn quite a bit while I was running the podcast, but not so much anymore. Yeah, I think there's like LinkedIn. I feel like is you're going to meet there's going to be on there a lot of folks that are in, for example, the like Australian or your local areas business community or whatever industry you're in. Twitter is going to be more like people that are independent, people that are like have their own companies or whatever it is, or people that hire X and Y person. I think there's pros and cons to both, but worth looking into. I think because I think there's a lot of. I think recently Twitter was kind of the main. I mean, there's kind of the stereotype of like someone posting a thread on Twitter and gets lots of likes and whatever, and it sort of became this like template that you would use to post on Twitter. I think a lot of people that driving a lot of engagement on Twitter are now also doing the same on LinkedIn. So yeah, I think there's a lot to gain from doing that. Certainly, I think there's a lot to gain from just being courageous and putting yourself out there as well. Like even for example, you're doing the pod. I think it's great. You never know who's going to watch it, and you never know who's going to like reach out to you afterwards and be like, I have this XYZ thing. Yeah, I think there's really only upside, or at least there is significant upside. It's one of these things like it's a podcast guest explained it to me well. They were talking about like an asymmetric bet, and so the downside. So let's say for example you're reaching out to someone to have on the show, or like you're making a LinkedIn post or whatever it is. The downside of doing that is quite minimal or low, even in some cases, and the upside can be quite large. So, for example, let's say you try to reach out to someone super famous who's like your dream guest. They say no, like it's the same. They say yes. It's a
Did
big
you reach
change.
anybody famous when you were hosting the podcast episodes?
Famous. I'm not sure. Like, I didn't end up getting super
Directors
famous,
of companies?
yeah, I think. Well, I got some of the most famous. I spoke with someone called Adam Gahar, who is. I'm trying to remember his exact role, but he runs a company that has like a construction company that has or it's like a real estate company. I think actually they own a few $1 billion of real estate across Australia and internationally, and he runs the company. He had some really interesting thoughts. So someone like that, is pretty cool to be able to spend an hour with them and sort of dive into what they think about things and how they think about like the way the world works. Otherwise, yeah, I had a bunch of people that like have their own books and do different stuff, and CEOs of different companies, and just different people doing interesting things, and yeah, very cool. But I think, yeah, like I said, no, I definitely shot my shot a lot of times, and if the person says no, that's fine, because there's no loss for doing that.
Oh, so you invited people to come to your podcast and they said no?
Yeah, absolutely. I've reached out to many people.
Really?
Yeah. I can I thought my rate of people accepting to come on the podcast was quite good, and I reckon it must have been around 50%.
50%.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of the people I was reaching out to was completely cold. Like I had no connection to them at all. And I was just DMing them on LinkedIn, with just like, hey, I know this person that we have like a mutual connection with. do you want to come on the show? So this is you obviously get a lower rate of response compared to someone that you know in real life, or someone that you like is a more like a closer connection. But yeah, I think there's no harm, right? Like I think you're just like if someone says no, you're kind of approaching the limit of who you can get, and I think that's positive.
Sure. Yeah. Good lesson.
Like if you're getting no nos, then I don't think you're reaching as far as you can.
Enough people, or the right people.
Yeah, well, I think like you want to be getting some no's, because then like you eventually want to turn then like, yeah, I think it's like applying for jobs. Like if you're always applying for a job and they always say yes, then like you're not getting the best job that you could. Like you want to be applying for jobs where let's say they probably would say no, but the 10% chance they might say yes would be like a real big change. And I think that's like a good, I don't know. I think that's something that I would try and do is like apply for things you don't, maybe you're not like qualified to do, or the probability of rejection is high. I think it's still worth doing it anyway, because worst case it's a no and you're the same as where you are, but best case they say yes, and then it's a step change improvement.
Great. And through this podcast and applying for jobs, how important is to develop public speaking skills? And you can also bring the Toastmasters project.
Yeah, I think public speaking for me has been something that I've done for close to 4 years now, since I first joined Toastmasters. I first got into it partially because I wanted to learn public speaking, but also partially because I wanted to meet people that were doing interesting things, and actually that's where some of the first guests I had on my podcast came from Toastmasters. But yeah, I think it's one of these skills that, particularly if you're in like a field that I'm in, like engineering, if you can talk well, it's like it's amazing. Like, because no one else really knows how to do that effectively.
In engineering.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like stereotypically, engineers are like if you had to rank professions in order of like who's the best at public speaking, engineers are probably somewhere down the bottom, right? So if you can do it well, then it's I think it's just so good, because I can go to a presentation, I can talk about a technical thing at work, and my presentation is always going to be at least good. There's other folks that are good at it as well, but I think it's quite a good skill to have. And one of the reasons I wanted to do it too is like, as you become more senior, it becomes more likely you're going to have to talk. Like, you're going to be the one running the meeting, you're going to be the one running the presentation, you're going to be the MC for the event, whatever. These things become more common as you gain more responsibility. And so my thinking was, hey, I'm like early in things, why don't we just get good at this now? Then when the time comes, I'm already going to be really good at this. So that was kind of my thinking, and I think it's something that it can be quite interesting. And certainly I've seen a lot of people come and join Toastmasters, and a lot of people think, oh, I'll just come and learn how to public speak and I'll just get over the fear of doing it. And that's kind of the thing that initially drives them. Then they come and they're like, well, there's actually so much more to this. Like, I have to, like, my vocal projection is something. I've got to move around the stage. I got to use like body language and like do this and this and this and whatnot. There's ways to structure the way I talk to make it more interesting. There's ways to do all these kind of things that you don't really think about, and can add a lot of value to the way that you speak. So yeah, I think it's certainly a positive, and I think perhaps you don't have to do it as early as I did, but I think there's value in doing that sort of thing. And I think particularly depending on your role and how important it is for you to be comfortable up the front, then it can be even more valuable.
No, I've been there, and personally, I strongly believe that Toastmasters is not only beneficial for your work environment, where you will be talking about, things at work, but it's also important for your personal life, because you just learn how to speak better with different audiences. Because at some point you will understand that not everybody will talk about the same thing, and you probably will not be able to bring a topic to that conversation because it's just not the audience, the right audience for that topic. Yeah, so it applies in both areas, either professional and also personal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think once you learn to talk a little bit better, or you get more experience talking, then I think it becomes a lot easier to engage in conversation, like just in group conversation, or like, because like we do things at Toastmasters like table topics where you get asked a question, you got to talk about it for a minute and a half, and this happens all the time. If you think about it, like, you're just getting asked stuff all the time, and usually it's something in context and something but at the same time there's a lot of parallels into how just life works. And I think there's good, like, good value in knowing, hey, I was really scared and afraid of being up the front and talking, and now I've conquered that fear. And I think this is also a good thing that like to and a belief to instill in yourself that, like, hey, I can be afraid of something and I can get better at it to the point where I'm actually confident in doing the thing that I used to be afraid of. And I think that in itself is quite powerful.
Okay. Yeah. And changing topics now. You said that you graduated from uni a few years ago. Okay. So in the tech
Yep.
industry, what can somebody expect in terms of salary when they begin the career as a junior, and as they grow from junior to senior, and actually how to negotiate better salaries with your boss?
Well, I think like technology, like if I speak from my perspective, the things that I've seen in terms of software engineering, I think like I started grad program. I think grad program ranges typically from like low end is probably like around 60,000, upper end is probably 80, some cases 100K. That's probably I would say like most places between 60 and 80, or maybe even 85 now. And then as you progress, you're probably looking at like a junior, maybe break it down into like junior, mid level, senior, and then senior plus engineer. I think like a junior engineer is like somewhere from a grad to like maybe 90 to 120 ish, I'd say. Mid level is like maybe 120 up to like 180, depending on the company. Senior is probably 180 plus. And then manager and senior, like staff engineer or whatever, is it really starts, I think, depend on the company and the industry at that stage. And it all impacts, I think, the company and the industry too. But I think on the whole, like being an engineer, particularly a software engineer, is quite well compensated industry in relative to other industries in Australia and particularly internationally. That'd be my assumption. I don't have much experience internationally, but definitely in Australia, it's very well compensated, and particularly some companies will be much higher than the ranges that I just said. But yeah, I guess that's what you can kind of expect. In terms of asking for more money, how do you get a raise, whatever, I think my philosophy, my personal philosophy, and I've been given I've had good managers and mentors at work, which allow this strategy to work. But my strategy has been sort of be so good they can't ignore you kind of strategy, right? So it's
Okay.
just like be so good at your job that it just becomes the obvious choice to give this person a raise. And so often, like we don't need to ask for a raise because it's just it's just very clear
Obvious.
that James gets a raise. So I think that and maybe that doesn't work forever. I'm not sure, but certainly that's worked for me up until this point. I think there's like when you're going to talk about asking for a raise, you do need like some sort of leverage. So I would like otherwise you're just going in there and just well, I think that's maybe valuable in itself. Like you don't ask, you don't get. So you could just ask for a raise.
You don't
There's
ask, you
nothing
don't
wrong with
get.
that. Yeah, seek and you shall find, right? But yeah, so I think you can always do that. I think it maybe depends on who your boss is. Probably all of this is highly dependent on your organization and who is employing you, because of their attitude's
Yeah.
going to be quite significant in impacting the outcomes. So I think ask with leverage. So apply somewhere else, or like go and just see what the market value of your role is and then compare it to what you're earning. That's also good. Yeah, I think those would be the main approaches. But yeah, I think otherwise, a lot of times when you're asking for a promotion or whatever, promotions are like a lagging indicator. So when you get a promotion, it's because you've already been doing that for some period. So if you're at a certain level and you're just doing and you're doing that well, that's what's expected at that level, is that you do it well. What's expected in order to get promoted, you need to be doing the next level, and you need to be operating at that level for a period of time, and then you get recognized with a promotion. So I think that's perhaps some kind of bug in the way that employment works, but that's how it works at the moment. And yeah, I think it's not reasonable to expect that if you're doing your current job like good or well, then and you do it for 5 years, then you just get a promotion by default. I don't think often that's not how it works. I think what's often required is that you perform at the level above what you're employed at, and then you are recognized later by being promoted. So yeah, and so my strategy so far has been, hey, I'm just going to go and give 110%, and then if my current organization doesn't recognize my contribution, then I'll seek to go elsewhere.
Okay.
And so that's worked well for me so far. But admittedly, I've had good bosses, and I'm still early in my career. So who knows whether it will work forever, but certainly it's worked so far.
Right. How long have you been in the market for?
I've only sort of been employed full time for just under 3 years.
3 years. Because you have just pretty much, well, not just, but you finished uni. And
that was like finishing uni. I did a grad program for 18 months. So I've been 18 months out of a graduate position. Yeah.
Okay. And there is one thing here, especially in Australia, out of the places that I have been, that is mental health and work-life balance. I see people talking a lot about this topic at work, outside of work. Would you like to share your thoughts about mental health, work-life balance in your life?
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate, I suppose, to not have had any issues with this kind of thing. I've had friends that have had big issues with this, or have had things happen that have been taken a big impact on them. And I think obviously mental health is something today that is very important, and it's important to that we all are supportive of others when they're in a state where it's clear that they're not doing very well. And I think it's important for yourself to recognize when you are not doing well, and to take a break, have a rest, recover. And so I think that's both yourself. How can you recognize when you're at that stage? And also for bosses and mentors and people in organizations to allow that time for their employees when these things do happen. So yeah, I think it's very important, and important to keep an eye on how you're going.
Yeah. So if you
yeah.
like, you believe that if a person is not doing well, like that person does not think that it's he or she's producing enough, it's okay to have a break, do something else, and then come back.
Of course, yeah. I think. Well, I mean, I think it's nice to like think about how can I sort of make more money or whatever. But I think oftentimes when it comes at the cost of your health and how you're actually feeling, particularly if it's like maybe in the short term that can be okay, but if it starts to be the case more often, then I think the trade-off becomes much. It becomes much of an easy thing to do. So it becomes much more difficult, right? Like if me working so hard is impacting things in my life, and particularly my physical and mental health, to the point where it's deteriorating significantly, then it becomes much harder to justify working to that extent. So I think, I think working yourself to the bone cannot be good. But that's not to say all the time, because I think there's some people that do work all the time and they love it, and it's actually good for them to do that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a conversation to be had around. Certainly, you should look after yourself, and I think that's obviously we don't want to stress that enough. That you should definitely take a break if you're under the pump and you're not liking things and it's really impacting you. Absolutely have a rest. But I think there's also a case to be said where there's no shame in working 60, 70, whatever hours a week if you like it. And I think sometimes we can look to someone that's doing that and be like, oh, they're probably, you know, they're probably not going very well, or it's kind of almost looked down upon. Like, why would you work so much? That's not very good. But I think there is certainly a conversation to be had there around, why not? If you like doing it, then go for your life. But I think obviously you can also do that, and it can be really really not good for you. So I think it's just that balance, and I think each person, it's most likely quite individual.
Okay. Oh, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing, and also thanks for coming and talking to us about your project, about your career, and also giving your thoughts of how to raise your salary expectations along your journey. Thanks once again for coming, and I'd like to open to you for you to say anything else before I close. We've just finished the episode, and again, it was great to have you here. Thanks for accepting my invitation, and thanks for coming.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me. Hopefully, hopefully, people listening got something out of that. Again, just my thoughts on things. I'm still young, so working things out as I go. But yeah, hope that was valuable, and yeah, pleasure.
I think that everybody has
chatting.
something. I think that everybody has something to share, right? Whether they are young or they are more experienced. It's always good to get the opinion of more experienced people, like you said, somebody who has a company that is worth a couple of $1 billion. It's for sure great to have a chat of 2 hours um, with them and see the way they think. But it's also good to see the way young professionals think and how they aim to get where they want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Regardless.
No, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, been a pleasure
No,
chatting
you're
today,
good.
mate. And yeah. Keen
Well,
to see
thank
where
you.
this goes, and wishing you the best.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Thanks for coming. Thanks, everybody. This was my episode number 8. And next week on episode number 9, we are going to have an electrical engineer who left his engineering career to become a gamer. It's going to be incredible to see. I hope to see all of you here. Cheers. This is the end of episode 8.